of the quarterly economic press briefing. Today, the Director General will be presenting on two areas. Firstly, he will be presenting a preliminary overview of the economic performance during the October to December 2019 quarter, as well as provide a short-term outlook for the economy. Secondly, he will be providing an update on the achievements we have made on the Vision 2030 Jamaica National Development Plan. He will be supported by Mr. James Stewart from the Economic Planning and Development and Research Division, and Ms. Pioj Bryan, Program Director for Vision 2030. Following the presentations, we will take your questions. Without any further ado, I now turn over to the DG.
Let me remind you of the purpose of these quarterly economic estimates provided by the Pioj. The Pioj presents preliminary estimates on economic performance for each quarter, approximately 6 weeks following the end of the quarter being reviewed. This is based on preliminary information available from the major data providers. This release of the preliminary estimate is consistent with developments in all modern economies globally, where it is the common practice to release a first, second, and even a third preliminary estimate before the final official figure is released. In the case of Jamaica, the Pioj releases the preliminary growth estimate within the first 6 weeks following the quarter, and Statin releases the official GDP figures at the end of the third month following the end of the quarter being reviewed. Today, we are reporting that real GDP for the October to December 2019 quarter is estimated to have grown by 0.1% relative to the corresponding quarter of 2018. This represents 20 consecutive quarters of growth in the economy. The outturn during the quarter reflected the combined impact of 1, increased external demand from Jamaica's main trading partners, which supported increased exports of some goods and services. 2, increased hotel room capacity and air seat capacity, which facilitated growth in stopover visitor arrivals. 3, relatively more favorable weather conditions, which facilitated increased output per hectare for some domestic crop groups in the agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry, as well as increased water production. And 4, increased use of financial services, facilitated by lower interest rates and a relatively stable macroeconomic environment. However, further growth was stymied by 1, the winding down of major construction projects and the slow rollout of new strategic investment projects, and 2, planned downtime due to aged equipment in several industries. Real sector developments in the goods producing industry. The goods producing industry contracted by an estimated 3.8%, reflecting declines in 2 of the 4 industries, namely mining and quarrying and construction. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing grew by an estimated 3% relative to the corresponding quarter of 2018. This performance largely reflected the positive outturn in the other agricultural crops component due to more favorable weather conditions, which facilitated greater crop yields. During the review quarter, other agricultural crops grew by 5.2%, with higher output recorded for 7 of the 9 crop groups. The most significant increases were recorded for fruits, up 44.1%, other tubers, up 21.9%, and yams, up 7.3%. This performance was supported by an increase of 4.2% in the area of the domestic crops reaped. The crop group vegetables accounted for the largest share of domestic crops reaped, that was 36.2%, and recorded a 2.9% increase in output. Total hectares under vegetable production increased by 0.3%. Growth was also recorded for post-harvest activities, up 30.7%, reflecting an increase in coffee pulping and drying as a result of an increase in coffee production. Further growth was stymied by animal farming, down 1.5%, due mainly to a contraction in broiler meat production, which outweighed an increase in egg production. Traditional export crops also contracted, with a downturn of 0.3% in production, due to declines in 2 of the 4 crops surveyed. Banana production declined by 5%, and coffee production by 31.3%. Cocoa production by 31.3%. Cocoa production continued to be stymied by the effects of the frosty pod rot disease. Increased output was recorded for coffee, up 41.9%. The increase in coffee production reflected indications of some farmers' gradual acceptance of lower margins, given the global market realities. Sugar production increased to 41,885 tons, relative to no production in the corresponding quarter of 2018. Mining and quarrying. Real value added for the mining and quarrying industry fell by an estimated 38.7%, reflecting a downturn in the production of alumina and crude bauxite. Alumina production fell by 44.9%, driven by a cessation of production at the Alpat refinery, as well as lower production levels at the other 2 refineries that were operational. Crude bauxite production remained relatively flat, down 0.1%. During the quarter, the alumina capacity utilization rate decreased from 69.2% to 38%. The bauxite capacity utilization rate remained flat at 57.7% compared with the corresponding quarter of 2018. Manufacturing. Real value added for the manufacturing sector was estimated to have increased by 0.4%, reflecting growth in the other manufacturing sub-industry, as the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry remained relatively flat. The other manufacturing sub-industry was estimated to have grown, reflecting higher output for chemicals and chemical products, while petroleum products remained relatively flat. The increase in the production of chemicals and chemical products was led by higher output of aluminum sulfate, up 80.7%, and salt, up 9.1%. In the petroleum products category, increases were recorded for liquid petroleum gas, LPG, up 57.3%, and automotive diesel oil, up 59.5%. These increases were counterbalanced by the declines recorded for fuel oil and turbo fuel. The performance in the food, beverages, and tobacco sub-industry was due to increased output in dairy products, up 3%, edible fats, up 6.3%, and condensed milk, up 33.9%. Increased output was also recorded for sugar and molasses, for which there was no production during the corresponding quarter of 2018. The beverages and tobacco component was supported by the introduction of new alcoholic beverages by a major producer and higher production of other beverages. A further increase was stymied by an estimated contraction in beer and stout, down 19.5%, and carbonated beverages, down 2.1%. Construction. Real value added for construction declined by an estimated 2%. This reflected a downturn in the other construction component, which outweighed an estimated growth in building construction. The decline in the other construction component of the industry was due to reduced capital expenditure on civil engineering activities. Among the entities recording lower capital expenditure were the National Works Agency, NWA, which disbursed $3.2 billion, down 54.2%. This fall in disbursement largely reflected the winding down of several major infrastructure projects, as well as delays in the startup of new projects scheduled to commence during this fiscal year. Jamaica Public Service Company, which disbursed $4.2 billion, 30.7% less than during the similar quarter of 2018, and Port Authority of Jamaica, Pioj, which disbursed $2.2 billion, down 41.1%. The growth in building construction was supported by increased activities in both the residential and non-residential categories. Residential construction activities were driven by a 133.4% increase in total housing starts by the NHT, a 19.4% increase in the value of mortgages by the NHT, as well as work in progress on previously started developments in the residential and non-residential subcomponents. With respect to the non-residential category, the main drivers of growth included the construction and renovation of commercial buildings. Developments in the services industry. The services industry grew by 1.5%, reflecting increased real value added in all industries. Electricity and water supply. The electricity and water supply industry recorded an estimated increase in real value added of 2.7%, reflecting the impact of increases in both electricity and water consumption. Electricity consumption increased by 3% due to higher sales recorded for 5 of the 6 categories. Residential, up 4.4%. General service, that is small businesses using less than 25 kilovolt ampere kVA, was up 4.3%. Power service, that is businesses using more than 25 but less than 500 kVA, up 1.7%. And large power, that is businesses using more than 500 kVA, up 3.7%. And street lighting and other, up 6.1%. These increases outweighed a 3.8% decline in the largest power category, that is large facilities, for example hospitals, hotels, and universities, using more than 2,000 kilovolt ampere kVA annually. To facilitate the increase in electricity consumption, total electricity generation grew, underpinned by higher generation from non-JPS sources, up 33.1%, which outweighed a 17.3% decline in generation from JPS sources. Water production increased by 1.7% to 21,150 megaliters, largely reflecting the impact of more favorable weather conditions. The expansion in water consumption should be viewed against the background of supply issues experienced at the Mona Reservoir and Constant Spring Treatment Plant during the October to December 2018 period. Increased output of 4.2% was recorded for the Western Division and 0.4% for the Eastern Division. Transport, storage, and communication. Real value added for transport, storage, and communication grew by an estimated 0.9%. This performance was due to an estimated expansion in the transport and storage and communication components. The improved performance in the transport and storage component reflected a 4.4% increase in total air passenger movements. This offset a contraction of 20.4% in the total volume of maritime cargo handled at the island's seaports. The downturn in maritime transport resulted from a decline in cargo handled at both outports and the Port of Kingston. The decrease in the cargo volume at outports was attributed mainly to the fall-off in alumina exports. Finance and insurance services. The finance and insurance services industry registered estimated growth of 3.4% in real value added during the quarter, reflecting projected increases in net interest income on the stock of loans at deposit-taking institutions and fees and commission income. This industry continues to benefit from a relatively stable macroeconomic environment and low interest rates as a result of fiscal discipline, which has led to a crowding in of the private sector. Wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation of machinery, WR trim. Real value added for the WR trim industry is estimated to have grown by 0.7%, supported by an improvement in some of the related goods producing industries, which drove higher sales, an increase in the employed labor force in October 2019 relative to October 2018, an increase in the combined volume up 2.6% and the real value up 14.1% of automated banking machines, ABMs, and point of sale transactions, as well as higher consumer confidence up 2.6% relative to the corresponding quarter of 2018. Higher sales were recorded for 4 of the 8 goods categories. These included wholesale and repair of household goods and office equipment, up 10.4%, pharmaceuticals, medical goods and cosmetics, up 7.2%, motor vehicles, auto repairs and accessories, up 7%, and other wholesale and retail sale of goods and services in specialized and non-specialized stores, up 5.9%. Hotels and restaurants. Real value added for the hotels and restaurants, which captures the majority of tourism activities, is estimated to have grown by 3.5%. This was influenced by an estimated 5.8% growth in foreign national arrivals, due mainly to increased visitors from the USA, as arrivals from the Canadian and European markets declined. This growth was facilitated by increases in hotel room capacity, as well as an increase in aircraft movements. Stopover arrivals from the USA increased by 11% to 443,314 persons, and by 27.3% to 10,029 persons for Latin America and the Caribbean. In contrast, arrivals from Canada declined by 2.5% to 103,906 persons, and from Europe, arrivals fell by 5.2% to 81,158 persons. Cruise passenger arrivals declined by 17.3% to 431,296 persons due to contractions in the number of passengers arriving at all major ports, Ocho Rios, Falmouth, and Montego Bay. Total visitor expenditure was US $932.2 million, an increase of 8.1% relative to the corresponding quarter of 2018. GDP performance for January to December 2019, the calendar year. For calendar year 2019, real GDP is estimated to have grown by 0.9%. This represents the 7th consecutive year of GDP growth. Growth was facilitated by 1. Increased external demand for Jamaica's export industries, especially hotels and restaurants. This was supported by higher levels of output in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners. 2. Increased domestic demand, underpinned by increased levels of employment. And 3. The improved macroeconomic stability. For 2019, the services industry was estimated to have grown by 1.6%, and this outweighed an estimated 0.6% contraction in the goods producing industry. The industries recording the strongest growth during the year were hotels and restaurants, up 4.9%, finance and insurance services, up 3.4%, other services, up 1.9%, and manufacturing, up 1.8%. For the employment update. Regarding the employment update, our sister agency Statin has already provided an update on the labor force survey. As such, we will not present a detailed report on this area. The highlights, however, are that for the month of October 2019, the unemployment rate was 7.2%, and this was 1.5 percentage points lower than the rate recorded for October 2018. This represented the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded in Jamaica. The lower unemployment rate reflected a reduction in female unemployment, down 2.6 percentage points to 8.6%, and male unemployment down 0.5 percentage points to 6%. This outcome reflects the continuation of the closing of the gap between the male and female unemployment rates. In October 2015, the female unemployment rate was 18.5%, which was 9.1 percentage points higher than the male unemployment rate, and now it's just 2.6 percentage points higher. The employed labor force increased by 29,200 persons to 1,248,400 persons relative to October 2018. The employed labor force by industry group as at October 2019 revealed that 11 of the 16 industry groups recorded higher employment levels. Among these were public administration and defense, compulsory social security up 10,800 persons, hotels and restaurant services up 5,500 persons, and wholesale and retail, repair of motor vehicles and equipment up 5,200 persons. For the short-term economic outlook, that's January to March 2020, the short-term prospects for the Jamaican economy are positive, based on, 1, the continued strengthening of productive activities in some of the goods producing and services industries, led by the recovery of agriculture as the economy recovers from adverse weather conditions. 2, growth in the hotels and restaurants industry, with preliminary data for January 2020 indicating an increase in airport arrivals by 4%. And 3, a general increase in industrial activities, as reflected in the growth in electricity consumption for January 2020 of 3.5% to 270.2 million kilowatt hours. Growth, however, is expected to be stymied by a continued decline in the mining and quarrying industry, reflecting the temporary closure of Alpat for the next 15 to 21 months. In light of the above-mentioned factors, we expect real GDP for the January to March 2020 quarter to grow within the range of 0 to 1%. The growth in real GDP for fiscal year 2019-2020 is also projected to be within the range of 0 to 1%. There are, however, key upside potential and downside risks to these forecasts, including, on the upside, a stronger than expected external demand, especially impacting export industries such as hotels and restaurants and manufacturing. 2, stronger than projected domestic demand associated with increased employment levels and an increase in access to loans and advances. And 3, higher than expected capacity utilization in some industries, particularly within manufacturing and agriculture, consequent on improved weather conditions. The key downside risks are 1, the impact of adverse weather conditions on the economy and its constraining effect on the output in the agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry. 2, planned downtime associated with relatively aged equipment and planned closures for maintenance activities, especially within the mining and quarrying and manufacturing industries. And 3, slower than expected growth in the economies of Jamaica's main trading partners as a result of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, which may negatively impact the movement of people, trade, and external demand for goods and services. Let me speak now to Vision 2030, the update on our National Development Plan. Before I provide an update on the country's development results, let me use this opportunity to remind you how we measure these results on the Vision 2030 Jamaica National Development Plan. Each medium-term socio-economic policy framework, or MTF, which is the implementation framework for Vision 2030 Jamaica, includes the national outcome indicators as well as relevant targets covering a 3-year period. The priority strategies and actions outlined in the MTF are intended to promote the achievement of the targets. Under the current MTF, which covers the period fiscal year 2018 to 19 to fiscal year 2020 to 21, a total of 75 indicators are being used to measure the state of the country's development results along the economic, social, environmental, and governance spheres of development in an integrated way. Measurement of the national development results is against defined targets for 2018 and 2021 and a baseline year of 2007 based on latest available data. Therefore, for data available up to and including 2018, measurement is against the 2018 target. And for 2019 data, measurement is against the 2021 target. The overall progress of implementation of Vision 2030 Jamaica National Development Plan under successive MTFs, that's for 2009 to 2012, 2012 to 2015, and 2015 to 2018, the results have been mixed. A summary of the progress made under the framework of national outcome indicators and targets for Vision 2030 Jamaica indicates that of a total of 75 national outcome indicators monitored, 66.7% have shown improvement compared with the baseline year 2007, while 29.3% showed no improvement or worsened relative to the baseline, based on data up to December 2019. This can be further broken down as follows. 36% of the Vision 2030 Jamaica targets were met or exceeded. 30.7% of indicators showed some improvement over the baseline year 2007 towards meeting the targets. 29.3% of indicators showed no improvement or worsened, and 4% of the indicators could not be compared in this way due to a lack of agreed targets for the relevant period. A summary of the performance by national goals shows that development gains were made under all 4 goals, evidenced by the achievement of some 2018 targets. With respect to Goal 3, Jamaica's economy is prosperous. Much of the development gains were attributed to improvements in the macroeconomy. The tourism and agriculture industries also showed progress, with the tourism sector meeting the majority of its targets for 2018. Notable progress was also made in the business environment, as the 2018 target for the unemployment rate was surpassed. In fact, the 2019 outturn continues this trend with a second consecutive year of record low unemployment rates. Notwithstanding these successes, the results show lower than targeted levels of economic growth and the need to advance improvements in the ease of doing business and enhancing international competitiveness for our main industry structures. With respect to Goal 1, Jamaicans are empowered to achieve their fullest potential. Gains were made in the areas of social protection, particularly poverty, including child poverty and national food poverty prevalence. There were also improvements in indicators such as the Human Development Index, life expectancy, and educational outcomes related to literacy. There are, however, some areas of concern, including chronic non-communicable diseases and attendance rates at all levels of the educational system, which did not meet their respective targets. Under Goal 2, the Jamaican society is secure, cohesive, and just. An unsustainable crime rate remains an area of concern. However, the country saw development gains in the areas of case clearance and government effectiveness, with the targets set for both being met for the first time since the plan was promulgated in 2009. With respect to Goal 4, Jamaica has a healthy natural environment. The country recorded a fall in the Environmental Performance Index, EPI, a key international index measuring the state of the natural environment in the areas of ecosystem vitality and environmental health. In 2018, this index dropped by 20 points relative to the 2016 EPI, pushing the country further away from meeting the 2030 target of an EPI higher than 80. The 2018 EPI shows a decline in all the scores for biodiversity and habitat, health impacts, air quality, and water and sanitation. These results will continue to play a key role in the pursuit of the strategic priorities for MTF 2018 to 2021. The ongoing implementation of this MTF aims to consolidate the developmental gains made in the previous MTFs and strengthen the foundations for achieving the country's long-term results, taking into account the many opportunities that surround us, the current developmental challenges we are confronted with, and the global context. The PIOJ will continue to lead the coordination of the implementation of Vision 2030 Jamaica, including monitoring and evaluation, M&E, to identify progress towards planned development outcomes, and to assess the strengths and gaps in the approach and the priorities we are pursuing to advance the achievement of Vision 2030 Jamaica, and to report these to the general public. Speaking now to the potential impact of the novel coronavirus COVID-19 on Jamaica's economy. From an economic perspective, the impact of COVID-19 would primarily be transmitted through two main mechanisms, namely trade and financial flows. This is primarily because of travel restrictions implemented to stem the spread of the virus, as well as the impact of the slowdown in the Chinese economy on global trade and investment flows. With respect to trade, Jamaica's imports from China include intermediate goods, consumer goods, and capital goods. Intermediate goods are inputs that are critical to the local production process in key industries such as construction, as in building supplies, and manufacture, as in raw material. Consumer goods imports from China include final produce such as clothing and appliances, which drive activities in wholesale and retail trade. Jamaica also imports capital goods from China that are essential for the industrial sectors such as manufacturing, mining and quarrying, and construction. On the export side, external demand from China is critical to the performance of the mining and quarrying industry as a major purchaser of Jamaica's crude bauxite and alumina. Exporters of non-traditional goods, such as scrap metal, also benefit from trade with China. Other areas of export with China include seafood and tourism services. An extended fallout in trade with China will therefore negatively affect the Jamaican economy, particularly through reduced export earnings and weakened production performance within several industries. With respect to financial flows, during the last decade, China has become a major development partner for Jamaica, with significant growth in official loans and grants, as well as foreign direct investment flows. These include major loan facilities, such as one, the US $340 million Jamaica Development Infrastructure Program, JDIP, which was undertaken during the period 2009 to 2015 and involved the rehabilitation of roads and bridges. Two, the US $300 million Major Infrastructure Development Program, MIDP, for which the main objective was to continue the improvement of the island's road network, as well as three, the US $326.4 million Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project, SCHIP, which includes the rehabilitation of roadway from Harborview to Port Antonio. Additionally, major foreign direct investments from China include acquisitions in the mining and quarrying and agriculture industries, as well as in private construction services. Given the significant economic ties between Jamaica and China, the possible impact of COVID-19 on Jamaica's economic performance would include: 1, weakened external demand due to a slowing in the Chinese economy and the associated downturn in global trade, and 2, weakened domestic demand associated with a possible slowing in new investment from China and the expected impact on output and employment levels, as well as the indirect impact on business and consumer confidence locally. So in conclusion, we summarize: the Jamaican economy is estimated to have grown by 0.1% for the October to December 2019 quarter, based on early indicators. This brings real GDP growth for calendar year 2019 to 0.9%, representing the 7th consecutive year of economic growth. The outturn was supported by several positive macroeconomic developments, including the attainment of the lowest ever unemployment rate, coupled with an uptick in consumer confidence levels, which provided a fillip to domestic demand, and continued stability in the macroeconomic environment. The outturn for the calendar year represents the highest annual level of economic activity ever recorded and reflects the sustained efforts of the successive administrations in laying the foundation to achieve more robust and inclusive economic growth. In the near term, the outlook for the economy remains positive. We estimate GDP growth for the fiscal year 2019-2020 to be within the range of 0 to 1%. The performance in the final quarter of the fiscal year will be buoyed by continued growth in hotels and restaurants and finance and insurance services. However, there are some downside risks to this performance, among which are the possible impact of COVID-19 and drought on the economy. The outlook for fiscal year 2020 to 2021 is also positive, with projected growth within the range of 0.5% to 1.5%. The main drivers of growth are expected to be the hotels and restaurants, agriculture, and construction industries. In closing, let me take this opportunity to thank all the hardworking and dedicated team here at the Pioj. I encourage us all as stakeholders in Jamaica to maintain the dialogue and to continue the collaboration as we sustain our commitment to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. God bless you all.
Thank you, DG. We will now take your questions.
Lena, what industries would account for the low unemployment rate? In which industries would this employment improve, given that there's a real...
So thanks, Mark. First, we did mention hotels and restaurants. We mentioned construction. We mentioned
it's wholesale, retail, and repair of motor vehicles, transport, storage, and communication went up by 1,900 persons. Financial intermediate services went up by 4,800 persons. But we can provide a detailed listing to you after. But several industries recorded increased employment.
Shamon Campbell, Nationwide News. I have one question for the Director General. Considering the possible impact of the COVID-19, the expectation that there will be a dry spell coming in the next 2 to 3 months here, and that the Mid-P program is winding down, I see that you have a projection of 0 to 1% growth, but is there a real possibility that a retraction in the economy could happen over the next 2 quarters?
Are you asking
contraction?
You're right. Are you asking if the 0 to 1% could carry for both the
If you
March
could actually
quarter
see it reversing to get actually a negative
to
growth.
negative?
Yes.
In terms of, so remember now, these are estimates based on the information as we have. And we've estimated in terms of impacts as we have. And so that's what we're projecting. And we've spoken about downside risk. So you're speaking now, could greater downside risk materialize? And while that's always a possibility, you could have greater upside also. That the impact is contained in a more, dramatic way, if you will. You see the authorities in many countries now doing quite a bit. And if those bear even more fruit, then you could easily see where that does not materialize. So we've highlighted it as a downside. We know that there will be some impact. And so to say a dry spell, you're just speaking about some negative impact from the COVID-19, but that can easily offset by positive impacts otherwise. So you're always looking at possibilities.
Follow-up question. You pointed out for the COVID-19 impact, it was mainly on trade and financial services, or to say financial transfers. But I noticed you did not include a possible impact on tourism. Has that been factored?
Yeah, we did mention that due to the restriction on travel, there could likely be an impact on tourism services.
Yeah. And when you think of the export of service, then you're thinking of tourism, right?
If there are no other questions, thanks for coming and thanks for participating in this, our quarterly press briefing. Join us again in May when we will review the period January to March 2020. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.